Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم The topic for today's khutbah is parents and children, or parents as role models. And we start with chapter 8, verse 28. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ عِندَهُ أَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. And know that your wealth and your children are a temptation, and that Allah is He with whom there is a mighty reward. The next one is chapter 18, verse 46. المال والبنون زينة الحياة الدنيا والباقيات الصالحات خير عند ربك ثوابا وخير أملا. Wealth and children are an adornment of the life of this world, but the ever abiding, the good works are better with your Lord in reward and better in hope. And the last one is chapter 64, verse 15. إنما أموالكم وأولادكم فتنة والله عنده أجر عظيم. Your wealth and your children are only a trial, and Allah with Him is the great reward. I can vouch for the truthfulness of this verse of the Holy Quran, that your children are a trial for you. Now, the point I want to make is that in the second verse that I recited, which is that wealth and children are an adornment of life of this world, but ever abiding the good works are better with your Lord in reward and better in hope. When you talk about adornments of life, you think about things which gives you pleasure, which are nice, which are beautiful, and so on. And if you see two kids, and one is all dirty and hasn't washed for 2 weeks, and his nose is running into his mouth, and another one who's all washed and properly dressed and so on, which one will look nice and pretty to you? To me, it will be the one who's properly dressed up and washed and so on. The point is that God says, I put things in trust with you, and your children and the wealth you get are something that God has put in trust to you. So, if you use them well in a good way, then you get a reward. If someone gives you something and says, here it is, I'm trusting you with this, in Urdu or Arabic they'll say this is an amanat, then what do they expect from you? They expect you to look after that trust properly. And in this sense, wealth and children are a trial, in that God has put these things in your hands as a trust to see what you do with them. So, we're talking about children only in this sermon. So, children are a gift of Allah as a trust from the parents. So, it's the parents' job to look after them properly, to bring them up properly. I do not understand the logic of this thing which says, oh, whatever you decide, I'll support you. Oh, Dad, I want to become a heroin addict. Oh, that's fine. Here's 100 quid for a fix. What is that nonsense? Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Dad, I'm going shoplifting. Oh, that's okay, son. I'll wait in the car for you outside the, Marks and Spencer's or whatever. What is this nonsense? Whatever you decide, I'll support you. You're supposed to guide them. And sometimes that means that, we're telling them uncomfortable truths. You're not working hard enough. You're not going to get good results. Or whatever else it might be. And one of the very important things that is ignored, particularly by Muslims, is the children's education. That is the crux of the whole thing. I was in Hyderabad in India. There are two cities. One, Hyderabad, is in Pakistan, and one is in India. And we went to this tailor, and the tailor had his 7-year-old, 8-year-old son sitting there sewing away. So I said to him, "Why isn't your son at school?" So he said, "Well, what's the point of sending my son to school?" I said, "Well, he learned to read and write and so on." And he said, "Well, but what's the point? Even after he's got his, certificates or degrees or whatever, tailoring is what he's going to do. So I'm starting him off now, learning how to stitch and sew and so on. And he can help me. My business I can do more business, I can earn more money and so on." And that guy is violating the trust that God has put in his hands. His ambition for his children is that I'm a tailor master, and when my son grows up, he's going to become a tailor master. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a tailor master, but you should have ambition to better yourself, to better your children, and the only thing you can that will make them better is education. And Muslims have always had this attitude. When the British arrived, what did Muslims do? We're not going to learn English. It's like in the playground. During break time, you're playing, and some kids don't want to play with you or whatever, so you turn your face to the wall and you start sulking. This was what Muslims were doing. We lost the emperorship of India. So what are we going to do? We are not going to look at why we lost it, but we're just going to sulk. We're not going to talk to the English. We're not going to learn the English language. We're not going to learn physics. We're not going to learn chemistry. All these things will make you heretics. And they got left behind. And the sad thing is their attitude hasn't changed. That was 150 years ago. The story about the tailor master in Hyderabad was, about 10 years ago. I think it might have been the first time we went to India. But is there any change now? In any country, whichever country you go to, the only ambition that Muslim parents have for their kids is, what's the age at which he can get a full-time job? 15, 16, get them out of school, get them out of college, and get them doing some work. Compare Muslims with other nations. Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs arrived in the UK at more or less the same time. We went to Southampton. At the time, there were about 4 or 5 Muslim families there. There were a few more Indian families, about, 10 or so. There was a man, an Indian gentleman, a Sikh, who labored, and he opened a shop. Groceries. You couldn't get groceries. You had to come to London from Southampton to buy groceries. So he opened his shop. And you could get moolies and karelas and God knows what else, and haldi and everything there. But that man would not let his sons set foot in the shop. Why? He said, they are going to study, they are going to university, they are going to become doctors. And guess what? Guess what? What did they become?
Doctors.
Yes, they became doctors. In one generation, when the father came and had the most lowly of low-paid jobs, because he couldn't even speak English. Things improved a bit when he opened that shop, but anyway, he had the lowest paid job, and his sons became professionals in one generation. At the same time, we had Pakistanis who did exactly what this tailor master in Hyderabad did. Oh, come on, son, forget about the homework. I'll have to pay someone overtime to help me in the shop on Saturday or Sunday. You come and help me. And guess what those kids are doing? Are they barristers? Are they Queen's counsels? Are they High Court judges? Are they consultants? Are they ministers in the government? What are they doing? Running the same shop. They might have opened one or two more, but that's about it. But unless parents put ambition in their children's hearts and tell them, you can be anything that you want to, and you guys can. Put your mind to it. You can be anything you want. You can achieve anything you want. When we came over from Pakistan, I went to this school called Hampton Park Secondary School. How many Asians were there?
Just you.
Well, there were two. There was one other guy, but his parents went back the following year, and I was the only one. And these days, I get tired of hearing about prejudice and bullying and this and that and so on. I was the only one there. You just decide what you're going to do with your life. I had a very close friend. I was in contact with him until I got married. This is what marriage does to you. It cuts you off from your childhood friends. And Ricky Paglia, his parents had come over from Italy. And I said, what are you going to do? I said, let's go to grammar school. He said, no, I want to start earning. And why don't you join me? I've got a job in this factory where my father works, and I'm sure if he has a word with the foreman, you can work the next machine and so on. I said, no. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to grammar school, then I'm going to go to university, etc., etc. And he did go to the factory and get that job. I don't know what happened. I lost touch with him in about 1975. And I went to university and so on. And initially I was earning a lot less than he would be. But my grandmother had instilled in my heart that you're going to get as much education as possible and go as high as possible. You know, people were crying about their grades and this and that, and so on. Grades are not the only thing that matter. Guess what grades I got? Come on, in my subjects, guess what grades I got? And let's go for A-level because they were announced yesterday. Go on, don't be shy. Shout out. Sorry?
An E?
What?
An E?
What?
Was
Thank
that-
you for your confidence.
C's.
I got C's.
That's all right. Not too bad.
So it's not just about grades. It's good to work and get grades and so on. But high grades, we should aim for high grades. But what I'm saying is that my grades weren't the top. But I still found ways of doing things and getting on with life and achieving something in life because my grandmother had instilled this in my heart. And she was a wonderful woman, my mother's mother. When I was about 3 years old, she would say, "Oh, Shahid, you're looking bored. You want to play something?" And I would say, "Yes." She said, "Okay, let's have a game." And she'd sit there with that day's edition of Pakistan Times, and she'd say, "Okay, you'll get a sweetie for each occurrence of the word enemy on the front cover." So, what would I be doing? I'd be reading today's newspaper. And I would be learning English at the same time. And thinking I was playing. I remember one time my brother, when grandmother called us to play, he whispered in my ear, "Shahid." I said, "What?" He said, "Grandmother is very cunning." I said, "Oh, what's she done?" He said, "She pretends she's calling us to play, but really she's actually teaching us. So we should be very, very careful and make sure that we don't learn anything." But if this was at the age of about 3 or 4 years old. So by the time we went to school, we could read Urdu, we could write Urdu, we could read and write English, and we could read Arabic. Just through her efforts. And whatever we achieved, whatever we did, and it's in a large measure due to her. So the Holy Prophet Muhammad himself, he said that when a man dies, what he leaves behind are 3 things. The good deeds that he can do come to an end. He can't give charity anymore and he can't fast and all this kind of thing. But there are 3 things he leaves behind. What is Sadqa Jariya? If he's done something and that continues to benefit humanity, then that will continue. It's called Sadqa Jariya. Beneficial knowledge. If he has knowledge of something, if he invents something, if he invents a new technique for a bypass, a vaccine for COVID-19, as long as humanity benefits from that, he will get a reward for that. But he said, if he brings up his children to be righteous, to be good, every time the child does something good, the parents also get a reward in heaven. So to bring you up properly is actually a bit selfish as well. I'm hoping that when you do some good, you may get a reward in this world, but up in heaven, I'll be going, hooray, a bigger palace for me, and that kind of thing. So we need to teach our children adherence to the Holy Quran, adherence, the love of the Holy Prophet, and the fact that we belong to a particular group of Muslims called Lahorians. Because we are the only ones that preach that Islam is a religion that calls for moderation, stands for equality of everyone. Men and women are equal, black and white are equal, and so on. Although others may pay lip service to these ideas and ideals, they don't actually practice them. You've been to Pakistan, you might have heard older women talking, looking for girls for their sons. Gori chitti hoye. She must be fair and white. Advertisements on television. Tibbat something snow. Use this twice a day and you'll become whiter than an English girl. What is wrong with being a brown girl? You see, the character of the people is left out. So what's the point of having a wife who's very beautiful, but well, I suppose this example doesn't apply to kids these days because no one can cook these days. It's all takeaways and KFC and McDonald's and so on. In my days, there used to be a big room kitted out with the cookers and so on, where girls would go and learn to cook, and a room kitted out with sewing machines where girls would go and learn to sew. I'm not saying boys shouldn't have been sent into those rooms to learn to cook and sew, but boys went and did woodwork and metalwork and things like that, etc. And we're the only group that abhor division and disputes and denounce sectarianism and fanaticism. If you look at news from Pakistan these days, so-and-so has done this, kill him, so-and-so has done that, kill them. And it's becoming more and more that there's no one turns to the due process of law. The crowd just grabs hold of these people, and it's like vigilante killings that you see in the Western movies. Respect for the rights of all creatures. Those of you who've been to Pakistan, have you seen how bulls and horses and donkeys, how they're overloaded to the point that they can't even stand up? There was a man who was slaughtering some animal and in front of other animals of the same species, and the Holy Prophet went by and he admonished the man and said, "What is wrong with you? Do you think that animals do not have emotional feelings? You're going to slaughter this lamb or whatever it was, take it away where no other animal can see what you are doing to it." And this is where I fall down, that, parents should be role models for their kids. And I suppose I could have been a better father. I was going to say a better mother, but that might have been difficult for me. But, could have been a better father and so on. And you see, small things. There's a chap called Abdullah bin Amir, Radhiyallahu Ta'ala, and he was playing one day and the Holy Prophet was sitting in his house and his mother wanted to call him in. And his mother called him, "Come, I'll give you something." And generally, what's the mother doing? Lying. He just wants the son or the daughter to come in. She doesn't have anything for them. She wants to send them out on an errand. Guests are here. The Holy Prophet ﷺ is here. Go and get some milk so I can give him something. So the Holy Prophet immediately said to her, "What do you want to give him?" And she said, "A date." And the Holy Prophet said, "Good. Because if you didn't, then you would set yourself up as someone who lies to get someone else to do something." And kids pick up on these things. I remember that my mom one day came home and she said there's a lady teacher in her school looking very worried. And she said, my 15-year-old daughter has taken up smoking, and mom said, well, why don't you stop her? Why don't you tell her not to smoke? And this teacher rightly said, how can I? I smoke myself. If I tell her off, she's going to say, Mom, if it's so bad, why do you do it? So kids pick up on these things. So it's the parents' duty. And this is the other thing that I dislike. There is no competition. Oh, we should just play football. There's no winning or losing. What nonsense is this? There is winning and losing. There are, if you, 3 people apply for a job, and there's one job, do you think the employer is going to give all 3 of them this job because there's no winning and or losing? Of course not. One is going to win, 2 are going to lose. So the best thing is to prepare your kids that in life you will face challenges and problems and disappointments. You will face prejudice. You will face people who will hate you. Your grandmother was at one time the only Muslim working at her place of work. And she faced more prejudice from other Asians than she did from English people, who did their best to get her the sack. But she faced up to the challenges. I mean, my attitude to job has been, no, it's only to put food on the table, just shrug my shoulders and find myself another job. But she said, why should I? I've not done anything wrong. I'm going to face up to all of them. And she did. And it wasn't 1 or 2 people. We're talking about, 70, 80, 90 people who were after her blood. But you need to be prepared for that. And not all this, come here, nasty boy, did he really kick you, etc. People are going to kick you in life. They're going to knock you down in life. You've got to learn to get up and get on with it, rather than cry and blubber and so on and so forth. You think we didn't face these things? Losing jobs, how are we going to pay the mortgage? Not having any money, and so on. But rather than crying and becoming depressed and distressed, you get on with life. One job is not enough to meet your expenses, so what do? Number 1, you cut down on your expenses, and number 2, you get another job. Yes. One time, I had 3 jobs. I worked full-time in central London. I also did translations, and I also gave private tuitions. You have to do whatever you have to do which is legal to face these things. So I think I will end here, because rather than kids becoming inspired, they're falling asleep, and other people are waving their wristwatches at us. So all this inspirational stuff that I wrote down will perhaps one day be printed in some magazine or other, rather than be related here. I try and keep my khutbahs short, but it is important that you learn about the downsides of life and have this vision, this inspiration in your heart. I'm going to achieve something, and not just be satisfied with the the first job, the first thing that comes along to pay the bills. Oh, perhaps I should have said this at the end of the Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'anil azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim. Innahu ta'ala jawadun kareemun malikun barrun rahim. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر Wallahu ya'lamu ma tasna'un. Before we start the prayer, can someone get me some water, please? My throat is getting very dry. Where?
On the podium.
Oh, I didn't see that. Thank you.
Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, qad qamatis salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdinas siratal mustaqim Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Qul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Allahu Akbar. Sami Allahu liman hamidah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Astaghfirullah. Allahumma. Thank you for joining us for our Friday service. Our next broadcast is going to be tomorrow morning. It's in English only at 9 a.m. UK time. And I hope we'll be looking at the concept of Hajj from the Old Testament. And I would like to show that it's mentioned as a duty to the Israelites as well. It was a duty of Hazrat Ibrahim from which both Ismailites and Israelites came. And then, of course, Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, Urdu broadcast, and 9:30 English broadcast. These are all UK times. All you guys who watch but are in different countries can figure out what time it is in your place. In the meantime, with the prayer that whoever you are, wherever you are, may Allah keep you in His protection and safe and sound. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.